Good morning. Grace to you, peace to you, welcome to you. This is our first Sunday back in Smith Hall after being gone for a while. We come back into this space in order to remind ourselves of the origins of Shadow Rock, as well as to maybe participate into some more creative and experimental kinds of stuff. And so this is who we are. This is part of who we are. And so welcome, and welcome to this space. I call your attention to announcements. You can take a look at all the different things that are going on and lift up a couple of things. There is a congregational meeting in 2 weeks. It will be here in this space again, and we hope that everyone can be here and be a part of it. And then today, after our worship service, is the after party, what we're calling the after party for PJD. And we'll be talking about freedom and responsibility. And so, yes, yeah, there are some of us that get very excited about it. And you could too. So, those are different things that are going on. So, we had a great celebration last week. So, today may feel a little more taking a deep breath kind of experience for us. And yet we are going to be interviewing Sue Lefebvre, and she is author of a book about no more deaths, and what a timely subject that is with everything that's going on and everything's in the news, especially out of Tucson, what's going on there with the man that is on trial for taking water out to the desert, and defining really who we are as a nation, and who we are as a citizenship, as people of faith and conscience. So we'll be talking more about that. Sue is also, as you know, she is married to Reverend Jean Lefebvre, and out of the two, she is the more interesting of the two. Okay. Thank you. Hey, we're here all week, folks, and so, again, welcome. Please take a deep breath. Know that the Spirit of life and love moves among us, in us, and through us. As we said last week, when you come to this table of Shadow Rock, know that God is saying, I know you, I see you, I love you. We hope that this gives you a word of healing that you need the most. So welcome here.
Unpredictable, irrepressible, dancing, laughing spirit, when we're tempted to be cautious and hesitate, you better start walking. Unpredictable, elusive spirit, when we're tempted to opt for certainty. Unpredictable, people-loving, freedom-loving spirit, when we're tempted to be shackled to comfort and conformity. Clear our vision so we may see things to which we've paid no attention in the past. Strengthen our hands so we may do things we've previously not dared try.
Yeah,
Hey. Thank you. So today is Pentecost, and you will see on the tables and around us are these red fiery lamps. And there's a meme on Facebook where Captain Kirk is standing in front of this whole row of security guys. And what do we know about Star Trek and guys who wear red shirts? Okay, yeah. And but it has Captain Kirk wearing his gold captain shirt and all the security guys wearing their red shirts. And he's like, nobody told me it was Pentecost. Okay? So it is Pentecost. And so we celebrate the power of the church. The power of the church to speak a word of love and peace and justice and to act in the world in such a way that it transforms the world in that moment. And that does happen. It happens every day, all over the world. It happens. The news does not capture it. It does not capture all the random acts of kindness and grace and power and transformation that happens. If it was to be captured in newsprint, it would be a newspaper so big that a forklift could not lift it. And yet all the bad news can be captured in a paper this thick. So I just want to remind us that the Spirit of life and love continues to move through the world and move through the world through God's people and people of conscience. So we celebrate Pentecost and the power of the transforming Spirit of life and love. Well, we also, on today, we celebrate our core value of justice. Last week we celebrated our core value of inclusion as we celebrated the 20th anniversary of being an open and affirming congregation, and a great celebration it was. And today we celebrate our core value of justice. Next week we will celebrate our core value of spirituality. And in part of that celebration, you will hear a very long and thoughtful sermon from your pastor. Some of you will hear that as a threat. But I look forward to being with you next Sunday. We are celebrating our 3 core values in a row each Sunday, leading to a time when we are going to have a handout that we will take with us through July Sabbath about discernment. Discerning what is our next wedge blade ministry, our next cutting edge ministry. And one of the main reasons I want us to celebrate this together and I want us to discern together is because, like all organizations, we have a process. We have a process where, like churches or leaders, they come up with an idea. And everybody is like, oh my God, that's such a great idea. And then as the idea unfolds and it begins to make more demands on the organization, people begin to buy into the idea more, or they begin to distance themselves from the idea and say, why did Pastor Ken do that to us? And so I'm wanting to have a discernment process where Pastor Ken can say, look what we have done together. And so we will go through that discernment process. You will have that booklet. We will have these conversations. It will carry us on through the fall. And the timeline is that by the first Sunday in January, we will be able to embrace and announce our new wedge blade ministry. What have they been in the past? They've been open and affirming. They've been immigration justice, sanctuary, hospitality to asylum seekers, family promise. So we've done it before, and we're going to be doing it again. All right. So today is about justice. And Sue, are you?
Lots of familiar faces.
Yeah. Is your microphone on?
Yep. Yes, it is.
I thought that was your usual authoritative voice. Okay. Yes, it is. All right. Well, the wisdom reading for this morning is learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. God has told you, human being, what is good and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God. So you've been doing justice work for a long time. Yes?
Along with Jean, yes.
Along with Jean, okay? And what tradition did you grow up in? What's your background, religious background?
My mother wasn't very religious, but she always made sure that I went to church.
Ah.
It was, I think, maybe a societal value. And after the war, we were back in Phoenix, and she began to go to First Presbyterian Church downtown. And I went there all my growing up years.
And that experience was one where you would learn stories and you would learn doctrine. How did that set with you? Did you embrace it?
At the time I did. And I was thinking on the way over today that also it gave me men in my life because my father had died and then my stepfather died in the war in the Philippines. And so I had a warm community there that included men, which was important.
Absolutely. That's a good community experience that reinforced certain values. What I'm wondering is, was there a threshold where your faith became less about content and more about action? When did justice become a part of your faith?
Well, I think I always had a sense of rectitude. I didn't like it when things were unfair, even as a child. And I realized as I grew older that dogma had no place in my belief system. That it was action and doing things and being part of the community.
So kind of an internal sense of what's right, what's wrong, sense of fairness, equality, that this is the way life should be. So very early, your karma ran over our dogma.
You might say that, but I always felt that the teachings of justice and doing unto others and that unflinching love that somebody has for you, God has for you, maybe your spouse has for you, that was the most important thing.
Yeah, but Sue, love is this warm, fuzzy feeling, right? I mean, the love is what is this feeling thing. What's help me out here. I don't know what that has to do.
Well, but action is love in life. If you're doing things to help others, that's how you carry out how you love people.
So if I have warm, fuzzy feelings toward cute little Central American children, that's not enough.
No, absolutely not.
So what more should we do? And I think this is what your book is about, right?
Well, it is. And when Gene and I decided to move to Tucson, he had helped to start No More Deaths. But we decided to move to Tucson after he had retired the second time from Shadow Rock. Yeah. We decided to move there and become more involved. It just became a natural expression of what we believed and what we had been doing.
Well, your work with No More Deaths is almost like the second act of a work of justice with immigration, because your first act of justice with immigration started in the 80s. Is that right?
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
And we worked with Native Americans and in civil rights and a number of other justice-oriented things that were happening in the world, throughout Gene's ministry, our ministry.
So tell me about some of the most profound experiences and relationships and things in your book? Why should we buy your book?
Because part of the money will go to No More Deaths. Well, when we first got to Tucson, I realized something important was happening. There had been 23 books written about sanctuary, which was in the late 80s, and I felt that this needed to be documented because it is a very, very important part of the history of Southwest at this time. So I started writing probably in 2008, and I just continued to do it, and it seemed a way that I could give back, even though my body was deteriorating. I could sit at the computer, and I could talk to people on the phone, and I could meet with people and get their stories and include it all in the book.
So then you have some quotes. Are they from your book?
Well, I wanted to tell you a story first. Shadow Rock had been involved with, well, Leanna Rowe led Shadow Rock to be involved with Humane Borders, which was an organization that started in 2000. And they put out tanks of water, and some of you may have gone down with Leanna to help service those water tanks.
Who's done that? Raise your hand if you've done that. Raise your hand higher.
Yeah, look at you.
Yeah, there you are. Okay. Look, several. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Is that an example of love in action,
Absolutely.
not just warm fuzzies?
That's right.
Okay.
And people joining together to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, before 2002, I don't know how many of you know who John Fife is, but he and others were the instigator for the sanctuary movement in the 80s that helped Central Americans who were fleeing the wars in Central America to navigate southern Arizona and get into this country. And he was the pastor of Southside Presbyterian Church. Well, he and his assistant pastor, Brandon Wirt, were coming home from a picnic at Bobble Kivri Peak, the campground there, and they came across a migrant by the side of the road. And they stopped and picked him up, and they took him to the church. He was there for about a week, and then he was at Brandon's house for 2 weeks after that. Well, Gene happened to be in Tucson, and Brandon and John told Gene about Jorge. Oh, and Jorge had a note with him because he didn't think he was going to live. It said, "God, forgive me for being in this forsaken desert and abandoning my family, Jorge." So Gene brought Jorge back to Phoenix and put him on the Greyhound bus, and he went to California where he had family. And the next May, he called Brandon's house to wish his wife Happy Mother's Day. And John, after that, said, "We have to do more than just put out water," which is what they were doing with Humane Borders and the water tanks. So it was in 2002 that the Samaritans was started at Southside Presbyterian Church. And then 2 years later, No More Deaths was founded. And the difference between Samaritans and No More Deaths is that Samaritans would go out in the daytime and have a Spanish speaker and a health professional, often a doctor, with them so they could treat the migrants. And No More Deaths was going out, staying out 24/7. We had a camp. Some of you may know Bird Baylor, the writer of children's books and adult essays, and she has property down near Arivaca. And so No More Deaths established a camp there on her property, and have been there 24/7 ever since.
And I mean, this is really a continuum that has started in the 80s. I mean, right now we see in the news, a narrative, and I'm not saying it's the truth, but there is a narrative in the news of people coming from Central America, being bottlenecked on the border, going outside of the ports of entry because they're not allowed to come in legally. And so there's just is in the news over and over again, all these different dimensions of this migration story, this human migration story that includes 24 people dying in custody of our government in detention centers, of these caravans of people that are coming, looking for another way of life, looking for something for themselves and their children. We have the story of a humanitarian worker that is now on trial and could receive up to 20 years as of Monday, so tomorrow. They could get a jury decision tomorrow. Do you know this person, and what can you tell me of this person? And really, his story began back in the 80s. Maybe not his story, but the context of his actions being on trial now started decades ago.
Right.
So what can you
Well,
say?
his name is Dr. Scott Warren, and you may have read about him in the newspaper. He was a woman in Ajo let the No More Deaths and the Samaritans have a building they call the barn. And so they have set it up so that they can house and feed the travelers who are coming there. And Scott was arrested in early 2018 for being there, and they're charging him with harboring and transporting and all those other bad things. And you may remember I said that Jean had transported Jorge from Tucson to Phoenix. Well, that's what one of the things Scott's being charged with. And he did not transport anybody. Scott didn't. We were in the court Monday, and they were trying to show that he had transported the man within Ajo from a service station to the barn, and he didn't actually do that. But that's one of the things the prosecution is trying to prove. So we met his dad about 2 months ago, and when we were there in Tucson on Monday, we saw both his dad and Scott and had a chance to talk with them. And they're doing pretty well, but 20 years is a long time for helping people. And he didn't give them a map, he didn't talk to them about where they were going. He was very circumspect, and the testimony of the migrants supported that they were dropped off at the house, that they went in and were told where the food was, they could see the cots, and they stayed there for a couple of days. And then Border Patrol came in and arrested Scott.
Okay.
The politics has changed. Can I mention that?
Is it okay if we talk politics? No, I'm not asking. Okay, go ahead.
Jean was detained in 2008. So, and then we had two people on trial, Dan Millis and Walt Staten. And their case, they were found guilty, but they were for putting water out, just for putting water out on a national wildlife refuge. But their case was thrown out at the Court of Appeals. And there hasn't been any court action since then. So No More Deaths had been warned by Border Patrol that they were going to crack down on the migrants and on the humanitarian workers. And so they've changed their regulations, and the head of the Fish and Wildlife in Buenos Aires said, if anybody comes in for a permit but looks like they're from No More Deaths, you get me. You tell me about it. And they were not going to issue permits to No More Deaths to go on to the Cabeza. And I have some maps. I'm going to ask Jean and Cindy to just pass them around. I think I have about a dozen, so if anybody just really wants to keep it, you may. But otherwise, send them around the room. That map shows 2,269 deaths in the desert. That's remains that have been found. There are at least 3 times as many people who have died. And this map just goes through 2012. So another 800 people their remains have been found since this map was made. And if you look toward the left end of it, it's where Aho is. And Scott, just by himself, or with whoever was with him, has found 18 sets of remains in the Aho area. He got his PhD at Arizona State University, but decided to study the Aho area as part of his PhD. And then he and his girlfriend stayed there, and they work with the Samaritans and with No More Deaths, continuing to try to support the people who are traveling through.
You have some more cards. Why don't you share with us?
Well, I do. One of the things that Ken asked me about on the phone was about people coming and restorative justice. Avi Chomsky is Noam Chomsky's daughter. She teaches in Salem, Massachusetts, and she's been out to No More Deaths. We've met her. Well, she has a book called 20 Myths about migration, immigration. And in it, she explains that on a global basis, people travel to countries that they know about. They've either been colonized, or the army has been there, or there's been support from that country. And people from India and Pakistan go to England. People from Senegal and Algeria go to France. People from Morocco go to Spain. And of course, people from Mexico and Puerto Rico and Cuba come here. And most of you are old enough to remember the Bracero program that ended in about 1964. Since 1942 to 64, we brought Mexicans into the United States to work. And we still need that labor. So it just makes sense that those people, when they're under pressure, when they don't have enough food, like in Guatemala, they've had a drought for 5 years, and they have to find some place to go to make money to feed their families. So that's we're part of a global migration that's going on right now.
That migration, I think that one of the premises that the reason why the immigration system in the United States is broken is because it starts on the wrong premises. And one of those wrong premises, is that migration is an illegal activity, where the right premise is that migration is a natural human phenomenon, that people will move where the food is, they're going to move where the water is, they're going to move where the prosperity is, they're going to move where the safety is, that they're going to move away from famine, drought, they're going to move away from economic oppression and poverty, and they're going to move away from violence. These are all push-pull factors that national, geographic, political borders don't take into consideration. And when you say that border is more important than the human experience, then you have set yourself up for a failed immigration system. That's right. What I'm saying. So right. What do you think?
Well, NAFTA was passed in 1994, and in the year after that, over 1 million people lost their farms in Mexico. And that's when this most recent migration from the South started into the United States.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had incredible migration movements internally in this country. We had migration from the south to the north. We had migration during the Dust Bowl, east to west. We've had all this migration that has happened. And the push-pull factors, again, were climate, economics, weather, all of those things where people are just looking for a better life. We can understand that internally, even though California did set up roadblocks at one time not letting people from Arizona go into California, okay? I don't know about that, but we make these stands without consideration of the lives of human beings on the line. So I hear you saying that is priority.
Should be,
Should be.
should be.
What other quotes do you have?
Well, I can quote a little bit from Scott in his trial. He said, "The crisis became real to me in a haunting kind of way. He found bones in the desert, and they were different from dog bones or coyote bones, and he just was so struck by them. He has found 18 sets outside of Ajo, around Ajo, and he found that when he watched a migrant coming toward him, that he would see the migrant and the bones, the migrant and the bones. And it was just so shocking to him, he felt he had to act." During the hearing, Kirkendall, his lawyer, said, "What are you doing spending your whole life helping strangers?" And Scott said, "It feels choiceless. How could you not do that when there are people dying around you? How could you not respond? Everyone who enters the desert will suffer. They have to walk a long, long way to cross the desert, and they'll witness death, either of other migrants or their companions along the way. It's an epic undertaking. You have to put everything you've got on the line in order to make it. It's the hardest thing they've ever done in their lives."
Sue, we are a small gathering compared to what's out there and the need. Why is this a good thing? Why is this the right thing to do, to talk about this today?
Well, it's in the news. We can't escape it, so we better talk about it. The crisis now with Central Americans is different from what I write about in my book. I tell about the beginnings of the humanitarian response in southern Arizona, and of course in Phoenix too. 42% of Phoenix is Hispanic. Did you have any idea of that? I mean, we don't see them much, do we? They're in other parts of town, or they may be cleaning our houses or be serving in a restaurant, but we don't see that there are 42% Hispanics in Phoenix. What was I saying?
We were talking about the value of this conversation, even though it's within these walls, it's within this small group of people, the value of this.
Well, Shadow Rock has a history of being involved in the migration issue. Starting with Liana and those of you who took water down along Interstate 8. But not only that, but Gene McWhorter and Herb, Cheryl DeVault, and others were involved in taking a trailer down near I-8 and placing it first on a man's property and then on the bombing range where migrants were coming through so they would have water. And amazingly, there is a community water station down there along I-8 where people from the community can go get water. And so when they would go down there, they would fill up the water tanks from that water station and then transport it to where they planned to put the tanks to reside for the migrants. And then the cartels got involved, and things started getting shot up and destroyed and moved, and so the project was abandoned. But we still have a facility near Maricopa where we house vehicles that were donated by John Michaels and Mary Lou from this congregation to service that area. So, and then of course you all have been caring for migrants here and people who've been here, who've migrated a while back, but who have been living in the United States under threat of deportation. So I know you folks understand the imperative. And I felt, when I was in Tucson, I couldn't hike, at some point I couldn't hike the trails. And I was writing and I thought, well, this is a way that I can give back and contribute to the understanding across the country of the issues that are causing people to come to this country.
You know, I've always blamed Gene for getting me involved in this, but now I know that he shares the blame. All right. So
He was the spokesperson.
he was the spokesperson, right? So, what's the last word you would like to share with us on this?
Well, 11 people in the late 80s were put on trial, and eventually there were just 8. And that included John Fife and other people from Tucson and Nogales and one man from Phoenix for a whole series of things. Where did I do with that? Well, and when they went to sentence them, the judge, Earl Carroll, talked to Sister Darlene Nagorski, and he gave her a suspended sentence. And she said, "Judge, you haven't been listening to me. As soon as I walk out this door, I'm going to be serving migrants again and working with them." And she said, "What could I have done with what I've seen? What would you have done, Judge, with what I've seen? How would you keep people being deported back to hunger? I am a sister of the poor, and I have to serve."
I thank you for that. In the 60s, during a civil rights march, a reporter asked one of the civil rights workers, why are you doing this? What do you think will change in our country? And his response was, "I don't do this to change the country. I do this so the country doesn't change me." And so we do our part for humanity to maintain our humanity. And I appreciate you, your work, your history, your legacy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll do it again, okay? We'll do it again. It's ongoing. Okay.
And my book will be available probably in 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, we will have the book out here for you to pick up, plus also all kinds of shameless promotion.
Shameless.
Shameless promotion, all right? And because it's a story that needs to be told over and over and over again. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
May I stay here?
You can stay here.
Thank you.
You can stay here. All right. I believe this is a time of celebrations. Is that right? Okay. So celebrations is a special welcome to those of you who are visiting with us. Celebrations is a time when we have an opportunity to share birthdays, anniversaries. Also, if we were surprised by grace, those are all things that we get to share. And when you share them, we celebrate with you. We celebrate the deep goodness of life. If you have such a celebration, I invite you to stand, and then an usher will come to you with a microphone, and that way we can all hear it. So We'll start on this side, and we'll work our way this direction like so, and we have a celebration here. All right.
Last night, there's 12 of us that gathered for a 75th birthday celebration at Tom Pinn's house. And one of the heartwarming things that happened was Pat Farmer was there. It's her birthday this year. And man that lived across the street from the farmer, or the Pinns, came to join us. And he was saying how his wife had just been having treatments for pancreatic cancer, and she was a teacher, and we said, well, what school? And she said Desert Sky, and Pat Farmer worked at Desert Sky, Desert Mountain, okay, and I said to him, I said, you know, your wife doesn't feel good, but if you tell her that Pat is here, maybe she'll come over and talk with her. And after dinner, he went over and got his wife and brought her back. And Pat and her had about a 20-minute conversation, and it just made it really worthwhile to have that birthday party.
I did. Thank you so much. All right. Okay, Forrest.
I'm Forrest, and I'd like to add to that story. About 3 years ago, that couple came to choir camp, if you'll remember. They came and were with us. Their name is Vicky and Jimmy Tennell, and Jimmy is my cousin. From a long way back.
Wow. All right. Very good.
And my celebration, aside from that, is last week my grandson turned 10, and my son, unfortunately, turned 43.
All right. Okay. I put it on Facebook, but I want to also announce Reverend Dr. Patricia Stantock Clark is part of the rare 100% club as she finished her work on her doctorate at Claremont. So congratulations. All right. Thank you. Dewey.
Yes, Dewey Ray. Last night I celebrated my 74th birthday with my sister birthday, Mary Saunders. It's also her birthday.
Yeah, very good. Steve.
I have two celebrations, actually. Celebrate my daughter, Heather, and my son, Ethan, who have supported me and gotten me through this time with Linda being in the hospital, fighting breast cancer, and everything else that's going on there. And hopefully, we're going down after here to see her. And hopefully she'll be home Monday or Tuesday, but that depends upon the doctor. And she does appreciate all the thinking of you cards that she's gotten. Please keep them coming. She looks forward to them, and she smiles every time she opens them up.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Chuck.
Yeah, Chuck and Sandy Bonsdale, on June 5th, 1965, we were married. That's 54 years ago.
Congratulations. Very good. Okay.
Well, all my life, kids have been my thing, and I've always been the guy out there rooting for them. And on Facebook the other day, there was something that just really meant a lot. These 4 boys, young boys, teenagers, were kind of at loose ends looking for something to do. Probably some of the rest of you saw this. They went into a burning house and saved a lady. That's
Wow.
what our youth does today.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Great. Just looking for something to do and decided to save someone from a burning house. Wow. That's pretty incredible. Yes.
Is this on? Okay.
It is.
I'm Jenny Blakesley, and this Wednesday, the 12th, our Adam will turn 48 years old.
Happy birthday, Adam. All right. Very good. Okay. Bert.
Bert Ruby, I just want to thank everyone who helped plan and execute the great celebration we had last week, especially Ken, Lois, and all of the Shadow Rock staff, and a couple of really great cooks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Herb and Mike, and all the people who participated, bringing things and being part of this wonderful celebration. I'm not going to give everybody's name for fear I'll forget someone, but I do want to thank everyone. And if you came to eat and celebrate with us, we want to thank you too.
Amen. And Bert, and that goes for Bert too. All right.
Me?
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Charlie Farmer, as June mentioned, there was a party last night for those turning 75 this year. And as you probably all know, Pat doesn't make it to the service anymore. But it was great for her to visit with her friend. And Pat will be 75 on Wednesday the 13th, or whatever the 13th is of June.
Okay.
So, send her a thanking of your card. She'd appreciate it.
Amen. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. Bobby.
I celebrate the idea that we've been together for 10 years, and because the month of June is full of just 1 week, 1 week, 1 week. My birthday was the 8th, and hers is the 22nd. And I celebrate that good Lord has kept us going. 91 years old.
91 years for you, 10 years together. Amen. All right. All right. You had your chance. What? Yeah. Make sure you're on.
Well, knowing how the summer goes for Shadow Rock, I want to mention now that Jean and I will be celebrating our 65th anniversary on October 12th at the Beatitudes, and you are all invited.
Wonderful. All right. All of these great celebrations make up who we are. And so we hold each other. We hold these memories. We hold each other in all this. I invite you to stand if you're comfortably able. Join me in the parting of spirits and loving the world. Time has now come for us to leave this sacred place. As we do, may we embrace the challenges of our lives and our world. May we live out new ways to be open and affirming. These are the times. We are the people. All of creation is blessed. May we love all and serve all. God be with you. And also with you. Amen.